to End Time Talk Radio, where the truth is usually stranger than fiction. The purpose of these shows are not to scare you, but to prepare you, because what you don't know could hurt you. The word says in Hosea 4:6, "My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge." Thank you for joining us. My name is Julie, and here is the host of the show, Barry Meyer.
Welcome to End Time Talk Radio. We have a great show. Hey, we have a local resident here in Cheyenne, Wyoming that I really think that you'll find very, just interesting. Very much up on what's current events. The reason why we're bringing people locally is that you yourself need to get involved with people that are local out there, because it's going to come to the point where the internet's going to be shut down, and you need to make sure that you have links with people that can help you where you're at. There's people out there that on the internet that are very good. Steve Quayle and, of course, Rick Wiles of True News and that. But the thing is, God has put people around you that can help you in these times. And so definitely start reaching out. Tonight is March 19th of 2013. Now we have Frank Smith. He was with the Constitutional Party, and Frank's got some really exciting things to talk about that maybe you may not even know what's going on here in Wyoming and Colorado and different things. We'll touch on a myriad of different ideas. But Frank, welcome to End Time Talk Radio.
Well, Barry, thank you so much for having me on here.
Well, I appreciate it. Frank, I first heard about you on the radio station here in town when you always called on Frank from the South Side. So I always listened when you were talking, and you always had bullet points that really would make people think. And so often I know that people don't understand where we're coming from because they don't understand what is currently going on in the world.
Well, and that's understandable, Barry, because of the fact that most people are victims of the mass media, or as I think Rush Limbaugh accurately calls them, the drive-by media, 60-second sound bites, and no conceptual thinking behind any of the reporting that goes on. So most people are prisoners of their own device by sitting in front of the television and soaking it up like a sponge. My viewpoint has always been different because I got my first shortwave radio when I was 12 years old, and I realized that I could listen to a program on Radio Moscow Saturday night, and Monday evening I would hear Walter Cronkite parroting the same lines, and I knew something was rotten in Denmark at that point. So I've listened to shortwave all my life. That was in 1963, I guess. I started, and I still listen on a daily basis. There are a lot of good shows on shortwave that'll give you a different outlook on the world events and the world we live in that you're not going to get from the mainstream news media that is basically white bread journalism in my book.
Exactly. I got a chance to speak with you a few minutes last week, and it was great speaking with you. One of the things we mentioned was that I have a radio in almost every room of my house, and then, of course, you mentioned the same thing too. With the TV, you just cannot find out what's going on, but the radio, what's neat about it, you can actually get work done, and you can also listen and educate yourself at the same time.
Yeah, I think radio is the best medium for education because, as you say, you can be doing something and listening and paying attention and also producing some product or some service at the same time. And I'm 60 years old. I've never bought a television in my life. I've got one because people give them to me. I watch DVDs on them or VHSs that I can get for a quarter at the thrift shop these days. But as far as television is concerned, I gave it up when Hill Street Blues went off the air, and that was 30 years ago.
I remember you talking about that. Well, Frank, let's go ahead and start talking about some current events that are let's start local here, and then we'll kind of broaden out into the world that we're seeing things. I guess one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now that's really currently happening in Colorado with Governor Hickenlooper. He's going to be passing those laws starting, I think it is tomorrow. I heard on the news on the way home. What are your thoughts on what's going on down there?
Well, my son lives in Colorado. I was talking to him on St. Patrick's Day, and I said I'm going to have to join my Republican brothers and sisters in calling these people Democrats.
Yeah.
Because there's a room for difference of opinion. You may be less pro-labor than I am, or you may be whatever, but it's a matter of degree. Now, when you start trampling on the Second Amendment, this is not negotiable. And when you start passing laws to infringe on the Second Amendment, you've crossed the line. You have violated your oath of office. You've committed treason against the Constitution, not only the U.S. Constitution, but almost every state constitution has a Second Amendment clause of the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So this is not a matter of opinion. This is not negotiable. And when you start doing that, then you open the door to, okay, we've got 15-round magazines are all right today. Next year maybe it'll be 12, and then it'll be 7 like New York has now.
Yeah.
And then it'll be this restriction. You can't have a frightening bayonet lug on the front of your rifle. They're after our guns, and make no mistake about it, government at all levels is after our guns, because the Second Amendment exists not to protect our right to hunt or shoot sporting clays or anything like that. It is so that the people have the means of overthrowing a tyrannical government. And as we live in this day and age, we see that our government at all levels is becoming more tyrannical. And the clock is ticking. How much are we going to put up with before we finally say, you know what, we've got to go back to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and start over again?
I told my wife, I said, it's really sad that we have to do things now to protect ourselves from the government instead of the government protecting us from foreign invaders. That's such a, it's sad that we have to be at that point. When I stopped at a stop sign, I told my wife, I said, how long is it before we won't do this anymore? And not so much stopping the stop sign, but when the government says you don't do this, that we say, I will not comply to what you just said. I will actually act like I have unalienable rights, and I'll actually act on those and not what you just told me.
Well, and that's the purpose of all these laws, is not for us necessarily to obey them, because we can't possibly know what they all are. The object is to make sure that at any one given time we are in violation of something.
Sure.
So that when Barry gets out of line politically, we can go bust him, or we can go bust Frank Smith for spitting on the sidewalk and put him in jail. Or a friend of mine has been mercifully harassed over driver's licenses over the last year. We arrest him and we throw him into jail, and keep him there on a tremendous bond that is absolute nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. But he's a political activist. This is what motivates the establishment to retaliate against him. It's because of his political activities. It's not, the driver's license thing is just the excuse. That's all. And that's what each of us face, and that this is how they try to intimidate us. Now, I was just talking to a service tech just a few minutes before you called. I was born in a free country, and I'm going to die in a free country, and that's all there is to it. I'm not putting up with this police statism and this, your rights are negotiable and the government's going to decide how. No, our rights come from God, and that's what everybody has to understand and believe. It's not because they're in the Constitution, and that's all well and good. The Constitution and the Declaration of Independence are merely saying that your rights come from God, from the God of nature. It's natural law that governs the universe, not law out of government committees. And this is where our rights come from. It's from the Creator. And that is why they're so precious. And we have to understand that and be willing. I mean, none of us get out of here alive.
Yeah.
So what do you want to be, the richest guy in the concentration camp, or you want to stand for something? And that's always been my philosophy in life, that I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, and I'm going to say what I believe in and how I believe it.
It's been said. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Frank.
Unfortunately, that's not a universally held belief these days.
Well, it's been said that once you become determined in something, all fear that would try to come against you basically disappears.
Well, and the Bible says, "A righteous man knoweth not fear," and I don't. When the government starts harassing me, I go, "Oh, good, another time." That doesn't intimidate me at all.
Yeah,
I go make a monkey out of them in court. But this idea that by fraud and intimidation, government is going to rule our lives is un-American. It doesn't belong in this country. It belongs back in the police states of Red China and Bulgaria, and back there where the people apparently are perfectly happy to live under Soviet domination for 50-some years. It does not belong in America. And we, unfortunately, it's mostly older folks, that understand this because of the brainwashing in government schools.
Sure. Do you think that people in Colorado will have the fortitude to say, no, we're not going to take this?
I hope so. All the sheriffs unanimously said we are not going to enforce these laws.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's not only our right to disobey them, but it is also our duty to disobey them. Because if we go along with these things, I mean, what separates the good Germans from the Nazis in Nazi Germany?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the good Germans lined up and paid their taxes, and they towed the line, and they didn't talk too loud to people they didn't know about the regime and all this, so they allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to face here too. Rather than calling these people the thugs and criminals that they are, we're going to say, well, we don't want to talk too loud. I might lose my job. I might not get this contract if I start spouting up. All that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is standing up for what's right and what's wrong.
You know, with our legislation that just got done with, one thing that really kind of saddened me with HB 104, they let basically die. I believe it was in the Senate that came from the House and went into the Senate. That basically would have told the federal government, you can't have our guns. Why did they not listen to us? Why did you think that dropped off?
Well, the excuse was that they got so many emails that were somewhat disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps they were reminded of their oath of office.
Yeah.
Perhaps they were reminded of the Constitution. I don't know the content of those emails. However, I don't think DCI is investigating any of them. So that was the excuse. But that's not an excuse in my book. They failed to do their legal duty, which was to, it passed the House overwhelmingly, went to the Senate,
mm-hmm.
and Nichols is the majority leader in the Senate. Well, we got these threatening emails, and we're not going to bow down to that kind of pressure. I'm sorry if I'm impolite when I insist on my rights, but they are my rights, and you better do your duty, which was to present this for a vote, and they didn't do it. I've only been here for 8 years in Wyoming, but this legislative session, Barry, was the most disgusting session I've ever witnessed. It's absolutely disgraceful what our legislators did and did not do. The Senate File 104, an unconstitutional act, prima facie, ipso facto, on its face and in and of the fact, unconstitutional. The Constitution of Wyoming states that the superintendent of public instruction will supervise the educational system. They stripped all of her duties from her to give it to an appointive director, except for she gets to do the one thing that's, of course, paramount importance, and that's pick the teacher of the year.
Oh, yeah.
That really must warm your heart. Everything else is going to be some unelected appointed official, and they also put a whole nother layer of bureaucracy in the education department. We don't need any more bureaucracy. Cindy Hill was doing a good job of getting rid of some of these bureaucrats, these paper pushers that do absolutely nothing. They don't teach a class. They don't coach a sports team. They don't even cut the grass at the school. All they do is pass papers back and forth to each other and call that work and get a princely sum of money. There was one gal in there that had her snout in the trough for a number of years at $140 an hour.
Wow.
As a consultant. And I can't recall how many hundreds of thousands of dollars she milked out of the system off the top of my head. But we don't need these kind of people at all. These people are clerks. They're $8 to $10 an hour people. They're a dime a dozen. You can go call up Manpower and get them sent over, because all they do is shuffle papers back and forth. They don't do a doggone thing.
Yeah, it's pretty.
People was doing a good job of getting rid of them.
Yeah, and that's it's just sad that these things are happening, and it's just like the governor just went and passed it without even. It's almost like there was like a grudge against the whole thing.
Oh, this started back in the last primary, in the Cindy Hill backed Hank Coe.
Mm-hmm.
His primary opponent, and I don't recall his name, I'm sorry, but Hank Coe managed to eke out a win. At that point, he had a grudge against Cindy Hill, and he got all these other people, plus the fact she closed down the office in Laramie, which was unnecessary, and the people over in Laramie didn't want to move here to Cheyenne to take a job, and so they started this coterie behind the scenes of whispering in the governor's ear, and of course he's a weak reed. He blows whichever way the wind goes. And so he was ready to go along with it, and they just manipulated him into signing it, which And he, in effect, signed his political death warrant because Matt Mead ain't going to get elected dog catcher in this state after that.
When I heard that Taylor Haynes was running for governor, I instantly knew how I was going to vote for when I found out who he was. I wish that he would have won, but needless to say, hopefully he'll do that again. We'll see what happens. With those things that are happening, of course, with the city, the mayor, he was saying how he's kind of concerned about, having guns in city buildings and wants to kind of get, so people can have guns even in city buildings.
Well, if I were the mayor and doing the shenanigans he's doing, I probably wouldn't want people with guns around me either.
Yeah.
This is the most, and I've lived a lot of places. I wrote this in a column for Liberty's Torch when that was in publication. This is the most corrupt city I've lived around.
Mm-hmm.
And I've lived in, I think, 6 different states and 8 different cities. This takes the cake. Cheyenne is the most crooked, corrupt town I have ever been around. The nepotism, the contracts, the favorites, the payoffs, the bribery. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. It's enough to drive the Pope to drink.
Yeah. And it's sad because it even seems like with UDC, which is Agenda 21, what is that, Unified Development Code? Is that how they say it?
Yeah.
And it's sad. It seems like the mayor was talking on the radio this morning that, well, you know what, we can't back that up because all this stuff has to be re-implemented and all the other things. And he just made it sound like it was going to be a ton of work to make this, to back out of it.
Well, he's already got his little reward from the United Nations organization for getting that passed, and that's what people got to understand, where the UDC comes from. And it's not a building code, as a lot of people think it's a building code. It's got nothing to do with gauges of wiring or plumbing or any of the normal hardware in a house. It is how you are to develop your property, how far your building has to be set back from the curb, how much foliage you've got to have, what kind of foliage you've got to have, what color are you allowed to paint your building, what the architecture must be like. This is cookie-cutter stuff, and this comes right out of the United Nations Agenda 21. And I've been on to this for 20 years, and everybody's been telling me I'm an absolute nut. And now here it is coming home to roost in Cheyenne because I figured they could get it by us rubes. And, in fact, they quick-pitched it a year ago last Christmas. They had 2 meetings, and they passed it around Christmas, and then one right after New Year's, and it was law without anybody knowing anything about it. And then when we found out about it, we went, whoa, what's this? Mm-hmm. And I've read it, and it is just, it's an abomination against private property, and it's meaning you're not a property owner anymore. You may be allowed to use it with their lordship's advice and consent, but any property that isn't up to this development code is, according to this, illegal, and they could make you redo it to meet this code, which is an ex post facto law, which is illegal according to both Wyoming and the United States Constitution. I mean, this is just an absolute aberration that this was allowed to be passed. I went back to the city council notes, and I read the notes. None of those people on the city council had a chance to read this. They did not print up one single copy of this UDC before they passed it. They told them, oh, it's too long, it's too expensive to print. Go to the computer and read, and I don't even remember. It's 386 pages or 400 pages of this stuff. Well, I don't know how many pages you can read on a computer. I'm good for about 1.
Sure.
And my eyes start to swim. And these people were very upfront with the fact they didn't read it. They relied on staff telling them, oh, this is great, go ahead and pass it. Well, it's not great. It's absolutely wrong to do it. Now there's a move to repeal it. However, when we went down to the Planning Commission a couple weeks ago, and a local fella put it on the agenda to consider the repeal. Well, that council chamber was packed with people there to speak about the repeal. So these people put it number 21 on the agenda out of 21 items, which meant it did not get considered to almost midnight. Now, I'm not a night person. I had to leave at 10 o'clock. And these people just left 1 or 2, and they went through this just endless division of minutia and talking about stuff that nobody cared about in order to kill time. So they got all the people out of there. So at the end of it, they had a few people. Emily Hassenauer spoke against it. Brad Harrington spoke against it. Albert Simpson spoke against it. Nah, it's okay. We're going to keep it. These people on the Planning Commission, again, they're appointed people. I'm sorry, they're playing God with everybody's property. They ought to be electable, and they ought to be accountable to the voting public.
Well, I agree. I was there at that meeting too, and by 7:30, I left. I'm like, well, I got some other things I got to get done, and nothing. They were on a C, which ABC, so they had like up to U to go through or something like that.
Yeah.
And Frank, it was just you ready to fall asleep. This stuff's about boring, but neither here nor there. It just doesn't seem like they're listening, and it's getting to the point where our words are not motivating them, and it seems like we're going to have to do something else to start motivating them.
Well, I think that the arrogance of power, Barry, shows through in all these people. They care less what you think. They don't care one bit. They're going to do whatever they doggone well want to do, and you can just pay your taxes and tip your hat as they go by and sit down and shut up. Don't kick up a fuss here. We know what's best. It's this condescending, aristocratic attitude that, hey, you dumb peasants don't know what's good for you. We know what's good for you, so just sit down and shut up. And this is not America. America is meant to be from the bottom up, not from the top down. And these people need to go back to Europe or wherever they came from and get their job as Count so-and-so or whatever part of the aristocracy they want to be, because aristocracy doesn't belong in this country.
Yeah, that's just sad that that we have a people like that. It seems like they're just sold out to the big money that comes in.
Well, isn't that going back to biblical stuff, the rewards for serving Satan are riches and power on earth? I mean, I have to think that that's absolutely the truth, because the people I see that are lauded about in the press and everybody genuflects towards are the most scumbag. I mean, I never thought I'd live so long as to see some absolute traitor commie like John Kerry be our Secretary of State.
Oh, I know.
Treason during the Vietnam War. He's absolutely treasonous. I mean, I'll excuse Jane Fonda because she's just a regular citizen. She's allowed to have her opinion. John Kerry was in uniform at the Paris peace talks, hobnobbing with the North Vietnamese and stabbing our country in the back. The guy is guilty of treason. And to have him be our Secretary of State, I just can't believe it.
With all that being said, I'm just going to touch on this is, with Cyprus, them actually going in there and taking people's money without them even knowing about it. It's just amazing they're actually doing that, and actually now they're considering it in New Zealand. This seems like once you start a fire, it really starts to burn.
Well, that's, they just decided they needed some money, so they tapped everybody's bank accounts. I think it was 2 and 10%. I can see that happening here. In fact, there were some hearings in Washington. It was over the financial meltdown, and one of the ladies who was testifying, I think it was for the Federal Reserve System, said, well, this thing could be fixed with a mouse click. All you have to do is steal everybody's IRAs.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to happen. But again, there's no security in an insecure world, and those people who think they're laying up their treasures on earth are going to be sadly mistaken when the time comes, because this is all a fantasy world of easy credit, phony money, and pie in the sky that's going to come crashing down. It's a matter of time when it does. It could be tomorrow, it could be 6 months from now, but this is a fiction we're living in. Unless we have gold and silver behind our money is worthless. And that's what it's going to come to.
Well, and I've heard that, the Federal Reserve that's on our money, that's not our money, it's their money. They're just letting us borrow it for this time.
Every dollar is a representative of a debt of a dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone I had a conversation with wanted to know, well, why couldn't we retire the national debt? Well, if you did that, you'd take all the money out of circulation.
Yeah.
Our money is debt-based money, and we have to go back to a reality-based money, and you could denominate it in oil, you could denominate it in prairie sod, for that matter, something that has real intrinsic value. Gold and silver has historically been the best, but to have nothing behind it except the full faith and credit of the United States is just a wisp. It's just a ghost. And the Federal Reserve System lends money after they create it out of nothing and then charges interest on it. a very good book to read if folks are interested in this financial shenanigans that have been going on is The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Oh, yeah.
By Edward Griffith. An excellent book. It's very long and very detailed, but he makes a very good job at explaining it on a layman's level on how this all transpired and how they managed to steal our wealth over the last 100 years. And this year is the 100th anniversary of this Federal Reserve System, which is neither federal nor a reserve, nor a bank, actually.
Yeah.
Not a bank either.
So many people do put their full faith and credit in that money. They don't realize, like, what happened in Cyprus. They can go to bed. Hey, bank holiday, we got to close everything down. They find out they have no money. Frank, when this happens, what do you think people in America are going to think? I mean, are we going to see mass suicides? Are we going to chaos? Are we going to see killings? What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I think it'll come apart and turn into just utter chaos. But it's going to shake a lot of people out. I think the yuppies will be throwing themselves off cliffs when they run out of toilet paper. We'd be better off as a society without this effete intellectual crust that we have on our society. Like Hank Williams Jr. says, a country boy can survive, and he will survive.
One of the things that when we moved outside of the city into the county, it's really rewarding, Frank, when we have chickens now, and it's really rewarding to run out there and see the chickens, feed them, give them water, and then also you pull out some eggs, and you're like, if things did fall apart, you really could live off eggs and some different things. I know we're not totally self-sufficient like most people, but we're better off than most people in a city, because most cities are not self-sufficient. They're dependent on the next truck coming in for the food, the gas, whatnot, whatever people need. That being said, people don't understand the country way of living.
No, and that's what's different between now and the Depression, where you had a great number of people that lived on agricultural land and were able to be self-sufficient, whereas you concentrated your cities have gathered the population into them, and now they're dependent on the trucks to bring food to the market. When those trucks stop, 3 days, 4 days later, the shelves are bare, and nobody's going to have any way to raise any food. And this is, I think, by design as well, because Agenda 21, the overall goal of this, is to concentrate the populations into the city, allow the countryside to go back to the wild, except for big corporate farms that'll do the government's bidding. And, of course, they're going to grow genetically modified food because they can grow more of it at a cheaper price to feed the people in the city. And this is where it's going, and this is why you have to pay attention to things like the UDC, because this is, it's a secret, but it's wide open. You can Google it, and you will read the United Nations documents that tell you exactly how they want to do this. It goes back to the conference in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. It goes back to the biodiversity agreement back in the 70s, I think it was. There's a long history behind this stuff, and it's stuff you're never going to hear on the major media, but you will hear about it if you listen to the Power Hour, Joyce Riley, or you listen to Dr. Stan Monteith, or Alex Jones, or Beth Ann's Common Sense Hour. You'll hear this stuff on shortwave, but you're never going to hear it on the mass media.
Oh, that's true. So often I'll mention something at work, just a news story, and they're like, "Where did you hear that from?" And I'll say, "I was looking at the Drudge Report." Well, what's that? And all they know is Fox News, CNN, and so on and so forth. Most people, they don't actually want to look up the news. They want it delivered to them, and how they want to hear it.
Oh yeah, packaged and homogenized and pasteurized and delivered in little tiny bites that never connect. That's how people want their news. At least that's what the major medias have made a career out of marketing, that sort of thing. Because it requires conceptual thinking. It requires thinking beyond a 30-second soundbite. And that's something that our government schools have failed to teach over the last generation, where the kids are taught to think from their emotions, not from logic. When I was a kid, we had logic in fourth grade. Now, obviously not a college-level course, but we knew the difference between inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. and what were false arguments, and a basic primer on logical thinking. But that's not taught these days. No, we got more politically correct stuff that we have to teach these kids, and we can't. We got to brainwash them. And the purpose of education is to teach you how to think, not what to think. But the latter is the way our educational system is going in this country, to the nth degree, because it has become a propaganda tool for the government to indoctrinate young people in a way of thinking government can solve all your problems.
Yeah.
Oh, look at these greedy corporations. Look at these evil rich people. Wow, we need more government, don't we? We need more government. Well, no, government's the problem. It's not the solution. And government is growing like a cancer on our body politic. And it is metastasized into every level of our society. And government is involved in telling us, what to eat, what to drink, how to think, how to drive. I mean, it's all the way down the line. They want to control us, where government becomes the topic of conversation no matter where you go, because they're sticking their nose in absolutely every place they can. This isn't what our country was about. We should be talking about, the best feed for chickens and, talking about real stuff, not government and government's interference in our lives. But we have to talk about these things these days because of the fact that they're trying to turn this country into a police state.
Yeah, and I like what Gerald Celente had said when he was a kid. He came home and he started yakking up a storm, and his dad came up and slapped him on the back of the head, and he says, quit repeating what everybody else is saying. Start thinking for yourself. And that's so true, because most people are actually in the conversation of what they saw on TV or different things. Because, what's interesting is, Frank, is I can go from work, I can go to Walmart, and I can go to the next store and mention, hey, did you guys see the Super Bowl? Oh, yeah, did you see that play? I mean, everybody was on the same channel talking about the exact same thing. And, I got the remark, they said, hey, did you watch the Super Bowl? I said, no. He says, they kind of gave me like a bad retort on it. They're like, what do you mean you didn't watch the Super Bowl? And it's so funny, Frank, how, the Super Bowl stuff now, we're seeing all this Illuminati, stuff popping up and different things. And people are like, oh man, I'm loving this stuff.
Well, I didn't watch the Super Bowl either. I did listen to some of it on the radio, but then I got bored and off to something else, and I forgot to tune back in. I'm marginally interested in a few things in sports, just because all politics and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But can't get too obsessed about this whole thing. But yeah, you're right. People, you can't have a conversation about the Federal Reserve System with a guy on the street, generally speaking, because they have no clue what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And this goes back to our educational system and how they teach, or I should say how they do not teach children how to read anymore. I'm a great reader. I read constantly, particularly in wintertime. And a great book that I think everyone ought to read is Escape from Freedom by Erich Fromm, that came out in 1942. He was a psychologist, and he was trying to explain the allure of fascism. And it's just a wonderful book, and it really makes you think about these people that just are little polyparrots. They go and absorb these little truisms in front of Fox News or wherever it is, and they manage to repeat it, and Fromm calls them automatons. They don't think for themselves. They're incapable of thinking for themselves. But they are capable of regurgitating what they hear. And I've always been a free thinker, and that's the reason I'm, political. I mean, I'm in the Constitution Party because that is the closest thing that I can agree with. Mm-hmm. I'm not anti-labor. I can't be a Republican.
Yeah.
And I'm not for special rights for sodomites, so I can't be a Democrat.
Yeah.
So I'm in the Constitution Party. That's the best fit for me. But we have to think for ourselves, I mean, I don't know why I keep going back to the Bible, but you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Yeah. And I had this on my shop wall years ago, and as I read it in the old Blacksmith Gazette, and some old boy wrote this in, that blacksmiths should know the truth, and the truth shall set them free. So I had a calligrapher make a sign for me, and I had it in my blacksmith shop. But it's not just true for blacksmiths; it's true for everybody. And we've got to think for ourselves, and you've got to realize these things don't add up. The party line doesn't add up. They hope you forget, but you have to remember these things, like John Kerry being a traitor in 1972. It's Paris peace talks and things like that.
Yeah, that's it's just sad because as long as people have money coming in, they'll never think about tomorrow. They always think about today.
Yeah. Well, I think in our affluent society, and we've lived on this, bubble since the end of the Second World War, where basically things just kept getting better and better and better. And the 80s came, and there was quite a recession there where, when Carter was president, the interest rates were, 19 to 20%, and inflation that they admitted was 12 or 13%. And when that was all constricted and Reagan got things back under control, then things smoothed out. But, we're living in a false economy. We've exported our manufacturing overseas over the last 20, 30 years. We don't really have an economy left anymore except a make-believe economy.
Mm-hmm.
And, our steel mills we don't have the capacity to wage another world war because we've shut down so much of our manufacturing industry, moved it to Red China or moved it to offshore, while the companies that, still maintain an office here can bring it back, slap their name on it, and charge us the price that it would be if they made it in this country and pocket the profit. We've got serious economic issues that, won't be solved in a generation, but we need to take care of our industry, and the way to do this and the way to finance the federal government is with tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
If we charge the tariff on this junk coming in from overseas, we would have plenty of money to run the federal government. The federal government could get off our back. As far as income tax and things like that, we should not be taxed individually to run the federal government. That money should come from tariffs.
Yeah, and I've heard that before, and that's something that we're not doing, and that's why we're such debt. Right now we're almost $17 trillion in debt, and what's interesting is there's that much money in 401ks, IRAs, bank accounts, and different things. Frank, do you think that could happen here pretty soon, that the government's going to have to start dipping into our own money?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's such a phony money system. Everything's hooked up by computer, and if they decided they needed some extra, they could do it, and they could do it easily. I see that happening eventually. Now, whether it'll happen before everything crashes, I don't know. But once the dollar does not get denominated in the dollar, a barrel of oil is not denominated in dollars, that's it. That's the end of it. Pull the plug.
Mm-hmm.
All that, we've exported our inflation for 40 years overseas by doing this. And when those dollars are now worth less over in Saudi Arabia or whoever holds them, they're going to come right back here and buy something. Anything, doesn't matter, whether it's land or machinery or whatever. They're going to come back here because that's the only place they can buy anything, and we're going to have massive inflation. And we're going to look just like Weimar, Germany, where you literally need a bushel basket of money to buy a loaf of bread. And that will happen.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to keep those chickens from coming home to roost once the dollar does not denominate a barrel of oil.
One of the things I feel often that happens, that I feel with myself, is when I try to warn people, I feel like I get a pat on the hat on my head, and they'll say, "Oh, that's nice," and then they go right back to doing what they were doing, and I'm like going, "Are you guys not listening?" And I guess what frustrates me is when you tell them, they're the very ones that'll come back to you and like, I need help. I'm like, no, what? I told you everything, but you wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, and then if you live long enough, it'll come back around. My cousin called me a couple of years ago, and we were chatting, and he said, Smitty, all those things you were saying back here in Wisconsin 30 years ago, and I told you were crazy. You weren't crazy. You were right on. So if you live long enough, you get to be acknowledged as having been right.
Sure. And, it's just sad that I even called the local radio station yesterday, and I said, what's sad for me, Frank, is that it's hard for me to find people older than me anymore with wisdom. It seems like they all want to be like the younger generation, where we should be the ones gaining information and wisdom from those above us and, that have gone before us and have ideas and wisdom on how to apply things in our everyday life.
Well, that's true, and I think a great deal of this is because everything has been dumbed down so much. Our educational system, if you find a textbook, an 8th grade textbook from pre-World War I, you read it, it is equivalent to college freshman now, or better. Everything has been dumbed down to the point where people don't read things of any merit. I mean, they read, People magazine and the National Enquirer and all this just garbage, just candy. It's all nonsense, and they watch stupid shows on television, and they call that a life. I mean, I just can't imagine that. I mean, to my mind, it's much more interesting to read a book on history than any fiction. I don't read fiction at all. I mean, I went 10 years, and the only 2 fiction books I read were War and Peace and Anna Karenina by Tolstoy, just because they're classics, and I figured out how to read them. Other than that, I read nothing but nonfiction. I read nothing but history, because history is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by it.
Yeah. Frank, sometimes people may hear this and may not quite understand how to apply it in their life. And so what I mean by that is, Frank, what are some tips that you can give people to maybe do some things to get themselves out of the tidal wave that's coming our way?
Well, I'll tell you what, and I understand we live in a visual society, so I would recommend people go out and try to rent Atlas Shrugged Part 1, and I understand Atlas Shrugged Part 2 is out now on DVD, so they ought to do that. And once they see the movie, then they ought to pick the book up. And I know that's a daunting book because it's 1,168 pages. I discovered it when I was 17 years old. It was published in 1957. The author was Ayn Rand, and if she's not a prophet in our time, I don't know who might be a prophet. So she wrote this book starting after World War II. It went to the editor in the early 50s and finally got hammered out and published in 1957. And it is the blueprint for what exactly is going on now: the rise of the bureaucratic class, the collectivism, the idea that we can, sacrifice for the common good, quote unquote. It's a brilliant, brilliant book. Can be read on several different levels. I've read it 4 times since I was 17, and I'm afraid to read it for a 5th time, because every time I read it, more things that she had said in there have come true. But the movie version is very well done. The 3rd part isn't out yet. I don't know when that will be out, but if you have a hard time getting into it, see the movie first and then start reading the book, and it'll start to click exactly what you're talking about. It's the individual, you are entitled to the fruits of your labor. People don't understand of the American Revolution and some of the things that our country was founded on. Everybody hears about no taxation without representation. That's true. Very true. But also another lesson in the American Revolution is that taxes are a gift from the people to be given when the government is doing good and withheld when they're not doing good. So we have certain inalienable rights as citizens in this country. And, God forbid our Constitution ever get thrown out the window and we get one of these new ones that they've been working on for, back to the 30s. They've been working on new constitutions because, we had too many inefficiencies. We have to streamline things. Hitler streamlined things real well, didn't he?
Yeah.
We don't need government streamlined. We need government cut in half tomorrow, and then cut in half again next month, and cut in half again the month after that. And we might start reaching the point where it should be. Government has grown like Topsy, absolutely like Topsy. We've got all these people that do absolutely nothing productive in their life. And see, Barry, this is what I can't understand. I've been a blacksmith and a welder most of my life. I worked in steel mills and foundries and machine shops. I've done carpentry. I've done all kinds of things. I have to do something real. At the end of the day, some real, tangible result of my labor has to be. Now, it could be write a column for a newspaper. It could be, whatever. It doesn't have to be made out of steel or iron. I have to do something tangible. And I just wonder how these people live with themselves, that all they do is push papers. I don't understand that at all. You've accomplished absolutely nothing. You're wasting your life. God gave you a talent to produce. The battle, as Ayn Rand said, is between the producers and the unproducers. And it's us, the producers, that are carrying these people on our backs. Now, the title comes from Atlas, who holds the world on his shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen if Atlas shrugs. And that's the key. When the producers go on strike and say, no mas, no, you're not tapping me anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going off and raising my chickens and having a garden and all this, and I'm just gonna exist and look at the wonderful world God gave us and enjoy my grandchildren and stuff. And you guys can be rats eating each other when it all comes apart, and it's going to come apart. But I would recommend that book. She wrote a lot of other books. They're really good. Eric Fromm's Escape from Freedom is an excellent book. There are just all kinds of books. I keep a file card on every book I read, and I just read voraciously and all over the map between history and political philosophy. I have 2 inches worth of note cards on 18th century political philosophy that I've read. Montesquieu, and, Jefferson and Adams and all these people back there. What were they thinking when they did this? And this is what has always motivated me. And I did have occasion to go to graduate school many years ago, and I'd studied the origin and development of the Constitution. How did this come about? What were the arguments going back and forth? And my area of specialty was the anti-federalists, the people who opposed the ratification of the Constitution. I know that's news to a lot of people because people don't get taught this in history class today. But a lot of the patriots of 1776 opposed the ratification of the Constitution. Patrick Henry was one of them. Edmund Randolph was another. Sam Adams got bought off by the fact they promised a Bill of Rights on the end of it, and so he gave tepid approval of the Constitution. Lots of the patriots of 1776 opposed the Constitution because they saw that it would lead to the extinguishment of a republic and the creation of an empire with a corresponding decrease of civil liberties at home and troops strewn all around the globe. Now, they were wrong because they thought it would take only 1 or 2 generations, and it's taken 200 years. But we are exactly where the anti-federalists predicted we would be ultimately. I mean, our republic is in shambles. We have an empire. We have a president who rules by decree, by executive order. We're over there, bombing and drone striking, people in foreign countries. And then we give a medal. We give a medal to the person that maneuvered the drone
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
kill somebody. Now, you tell me that's right. I'm sorry, that's dead wrong. That's absolutely wrong. What we've done all across the world since the Second World War, our foreign policy is an absolute mess. We've intervened. We've made enemies. The CIA has had their fingers in every country in the globe, including Soviet Russia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All over the map. Brazil, Guatemala, the Congo, you name it. The CIA has gone in there and fomented revolution. What they're doing in Syria right now, the ambassador in Libya was killed. He was running the arms from Libya into the Syrian rebels. Petraeus was running the CIA front rebellion against Assad in Syria in order to create chaos. This is what's going on in the world, and you're not going to read this in the newspaper. You've got to listen to shortwave. You've got to read American Free Press. There's all kinds of things out there in alternative media these days.
Frank, with the Atlas Shrugged, I got a question to ask you. Who is John Galt? I'm not making a pun, but you hear it everywhere.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just joking around. I just said, who is John Galt? You always hear about that all over the place. Who is John Galt? I always hear about that all the time in the movie and also other places too talking about that.
Well, my first blacksmith shop was named the John Galt Blacksmith Works.
Oh, was it?
And people would come in and they'd realize that, no, you're Frank Smith, you're not John. Well, who is John Galt? And I would tell them, you're like most Americans. You think if I tell you the answer, you will know. Well, of course I will. Okay, John Galt is the man who stopped the motor of the world. Now do you know? No.
Yeah.
You got to read the book to figure out who John Galt is.
Yeah.
And it's an excellent book. It, like I said, can be read on several different levels. As a romance, as an adventure, as a political treatise, as a philosophical work, as an economic treatise. It's a magnus opus of Ayn Rand's life, and this is how you can understand exactly what's going on in this day and age,
mm-hmm.
With the growth of the bureaucracy and the power that we've we've allowed them. But, it comes back to the individual, and Patrick Henry said this and he spoke against the ratification of the Constitution in the Virginia Convention every day for 27 days. And one day he said, look, you can have all the constitutions in the world, but it's going to come down to the individual standing upon his rights to protect it. And that is what it's all about. If nobody's going to come save your bacon, you have to decide when you're going to draw a line in the sand and when you're going to say no more. I'm not your slave. I'm not your serf. I refuse to obey this. And I hope everybody in Colorado, with these draconian gun laws that the Governor Hickenlooper, who should be in prison, by the way, for his accessory to murder, because he hired an illegal alien that murdered a police officer in Denver, and he was, of course, mayor of Denver, and he never got charged or even questioned on it. He's the governor. He's going to sign these laws. But the people of Colorado have to say, no, by God, I'm American. I'm a free American. I have these constitutional rights, and I am going to do what I want to do and see where it leads. We cannot keep supporting the people that want to oppress us. We can't give them the sanction. We can't say, oh, yes, NASA, well, we'll just go along with this one more step. If we sew this yellow star on our sleeve, then Hitler will leave us alone. No, Hitler ain't going to leave you alone. Hitler's going to come back for more and more and more. This is the lesson of Nazi Germany, is that every little thing that Hitler pushed the Jews or the communists or whatever, they went along with until they're powerless, until they're absolutely, abjectly powerless to do anything about it. Rather than, this came to me when I was a kid and watching all these documentaries on Second World War. If every Jew had decided, you know what, I'm going to take one German soldier with me, it would have happened. It never would have happened. The reason it happened is because the Third Reich made a profit on the extermination of the Jew. First, they put them in camps and they worked them half to death, and then when they killed them, they ground their bones up and sold it for fertilizer, pulled the gold teeth out, shorn their hair off, and filled mattresses with their hair. They made a profit on every victim of the Holocaust. Now, if it had cost them 25 marks apiece instead of made them 25 marks, it never would have happened.
Yeah.
Those people gave the sanctions to their persecutor to persecute them. And that's what it comes down to. None of us get out of here alive. We have to stand for what we believe in, and we have to be willing to pay the piper. And I've certainly paid the piper in my life for my outspoken political thoughts and beliefs, but hey, so be it.
Yeah.
It is, man.
Kind of going even deeper here, Frank. I always try to be one that tries to listen to what people are hearing, what they're saying, things that come across, and so I'm always asking questions. And I was filling up at the local gas station here in town, and over there by Sam's Club, and there was an older gentleman that was managing the place, and we were talking, and he had told me that he was over in South Korea when Jerry Lewis came over, and he had done a movie, and he actually ran the tank through the house. And, that was just a trivial thing that, I thought was interesting. But he said, what's even more interesting, he said, I was in the service, and, I served my country. And he said, what's really sad, I keep seeing these troops coming through, Chinese and Russian troops. And he says, one of them I got to talk to and showed me his ID. This is back in September. And the guy said, the American people better get it right this time. And he says, well, and he was talking, I heard other people talk about they're seeing troops here too. Are you hearing the same thing?
I've heard this on and off for years and years.
Okay.
And I don't know specifically if it's true or not true, but certainly when the police state comes upon us, it's not going to be our local police, and it's not going to be our sheriffs, and it's not going to be our National Guard. Down in Katrina, they didn't send the Louisiana National Guard, and they put some other state's National Guard in there. What Hitler did was recruit people from one end of Germany and send them over to Bavaria to oppress those people because they were different. Now, what I've heard is Wyoming, and the vehicle for this is going to be the United Nations. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And the troops scheduled to come into Wyoming, and this is scuttlebutt, I don't know this for a fact, are going to be Belgique, from Belgium.
Sure.
Because there are so few Belgian settlers in this country. Whereas you go to Wisconsin, there's a lot of Germans, there's a lot of Poles, and all that, and so they would pick somebody else to go over and oppress Wisconsin. But those blue helmets, man, they make good targets.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
I just can't wait to get a blue target in my sight because I'm not going to put up with it.
Yeah.
This stuff has got to stop, and I ain't getting any younger. And I know we're heading for revolution in my heart. I wish it were not so, but I don't see how we were going to set this country on the right path politically because of the aristocratic attitude of people in power. And this is top to the bottom. They could care less what you and I think of them, what you and I say, whatever logical arguments we lay out. They flat out don't care. They're going to do whatever their masters tell them to do because they want to be patted on the head like our mayor maybe got his little reward or a little trophy, went off to New York and got patted on the head by the UN people because he got this rammed through in our city.
Yeah.
And, we're going to have to do something sooner or later. And, I ain't getting any younger, and none of us get out of here alive, and the sooner the better in my book. Because, it's not me I'm concerned about. I mean, I'm 60 years old. I ain't going to live forever. I've got children. I've got granddaughters. What kind of country are they growing up in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing I want to take from Gerald Celente, he said, when people lose everything, they're going to lose it. And, that's the reason why we got out of town, because when desperate people do in desperate things, they do desperate, in desperate times, they do desperate things. And that's why we got out of the town into the county, because, you don't know what people could do. And at least in the county, you got less people around you, so you know your neighbors a little bit better than, because we lived in town, Frank, for so many years, and we never even got to know our neighbors. I mean, it was just almost like living in Chicago or New York. We just didn't know anybody. And, now we're out in the county, and we've already had our neighbors come over and invite us over. Hey, guys, come on. It feels like we're in very rural America.
Well, rural America is really the heartland of America, and that's Jefferson, particular saw that the yeoman farmer was the backbone of this country. He really didn't think this was going to work, like in a European setting where you have licentious mobs, and these politicians cater to the mob mentality. It's the self-sufficient farmer, the rancher, whatever,
mm-hmm.
that is really the backbone of this country. And this is the first time I've lived in town in many years. I was out in the country in Nevada before I moved here, and I had quite the flock of chickens, and I had my dogs, and I had a garden, and all that sort of thing. And now I'm living in the city, and I don't like it. I wish I was out in the country, but I've got to run a business.
Sure.
Liberty Blacksmithing on South Greeley Highway here in Cheyenne, and people are willing, can stop in and say howdy. I'm trying to curtail the political activities because I'm starting up a new line of work here, and I really got my hands full. So politics, I got to kind of back off. I ran for county commissioner last time. Unfortunately, I didn't have any money, and as they say, money is the mother's milk of politics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sad that you just can't run because you're a good person. And I think we just lost Frank. So let me pause here for a second and let me call him right back.
Hello?
Hey, Frank. Well, that was kind of weird. I just lost you, but anyways, getting back to where we were at. It's just I kind of lost my train of thought. We got about 10 minutes here left, Frank. With you living in town, and then of course I'm out in the county now, and of course with you running the business, I'm thinking of what you were talking about. You were talking about, you're trying to get out of politics, and I think you were trying to finish up something here before I lost you.
Well, I've been so wrapped up in politics, particularly in the last 6 months when I ran for county commissioner. I've written a column for Libby's Torch for the year that it was in publication and been very active in local politics, but I really have to turn my interest to earning a living. I still have to eke out a living at least for another year or two till I can collect Social Security. And I wish I were independently wealthy. And I've advertised for a rich widow to marry me in the Second American Revolution, but I don't have any takers. So I really have to, concentrate on my business aspirations and such. But, as Jefferson said, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And Barry, we haven't, as a society, been willing to pay that price. Mm-hmm. And we've allowed these people to get away with bloody murder, actually, literally bloody murder. And I can put the watershed moment in my life and really in our society when John Kennedy was assassinated, and they tried to feed us this line that it was Lee Harvey Oswald with a bolt-action Carcano that had fired 3 shots in 6 seconds and managed to kill the president, and that wasn't true, and I knew it was true. And I've read many books on Kennedy's assassination. I actually had a Carcano at one time, the biggest piece of junk you'd ever shake a stick at. There's no way in the world you could even work that bolt in 6 seconds to put 3 shots down range, let alone hit anything with it. I mean, the whole thing was a bill of goods, and ever since that moment, our country started turning sour. We got involved in this no-win war in Vietnam. We got involved in inflating the currency. We took the silver out of our coinage in order to pay for Vietnam. We raided Social Security funds in order to pay for Vietnam. And the whole bureaucracy started to grow like crazy. Mm-hmm. Really, at that point in time, things started coming apart in our country. And now we've got, and I say to people, we need a revolution, but I don't mean just a political revolution, Barry. We need a moral and ethical revolution as well. We need to return to some basic values that, that I was brought up with. I told my son that he lived with his girlfriend for a long time before they got married, and I kept trying to hint around, and finally I said, look, I never asked your mother to live with me because I had too much respect for her. Yeah. I would never think something like that. I would never have done anything like that. And I'm not putting people down who want to do that if that's what they want to do, but it's not right. Mm-hmm. It's flat out not right. If you love a woman, marry her. Do the right thing by her. And then the people that have children and don't marry the mother, I mean, my word, heaven.
Yeah, I agree.
Have we come this far? And then to turn around and say, well, the homosexuals just want their civil rights, and to compare their so-called struggle for civil rights with the black civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s, my word in heaven, we're talking about voting rights. We're talking about equal accommodations. We're talking about, equal opportunity in hiring that the black folks went through. Nobody's got separate drinking fountains for the homosexuals. Mm-hmm. Nobody's telling them to go into the restroom marked homosexual only. This isn't a civil right that they need to be married to one another. And I know homophobe. I have friends that were homosexual and people in my family, and they want nothing to do with this. This is a radical agenda by people that are out to debase the meaning of marriage. Not that they necessarily want to get married, but they want to debase it.
Yeah.
And ruin it. And this is just flat out wrong. And I don't see any way to paint this that it's somehow right. And I'm pretty much a libertarian in a lot of respects, but there are things, as Aristotle said, adultery does not consist in being right by being done with the right woman in the right place in the right manner. It is by nature wrong. And there are things that are by nature right and are by nature wrong. And we blurred that line in our society so badly that people really can't follow it at all. They can't use their own brain to figure out, okay, now if I do this, let's see what's going to happen. I could do this meth and I can have a heart attack. My teeth will fall out. Well, I guess that just comes with the thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's wrong. It's just flat out wrong.
Yeah.
I see things in black and white. Mm-hmm. And, there are no shades of gray. You just have to look closer to determine the black and white. That's all. Look at a picture in the newspaper with a magnifying glass. It's all black and white. Even the grays are black and white. So, these are things that our society is coming apart at the seams, and it's not by happenstance. It's by design.
Yeah.
It is by the welfare system to get the man out of the family, to allow the women to be head of the household and disintegrate the family. The whole thing is by design in order to conquer us, because we're the most successful society on the face of the earth right now, not only in material goods, but we were at one point very moral people, very religious people. That we are under attack from all sides, from every government, from every special interest group, and all this. And I see our society disintegrating like sand in the tide.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to cause, it's going to need a personal revolution of saying, this is right, this is wrong. I don't want to part of anything that's wrong.
Frank, I think that was very well said. I really appreciate your heart. That's why I always looking for people to really speak from their heart, and that's what the audience needs to hear, is to hear the truth and hear what you're feeling inside. I know that God's given me a great wife. We've been married. Well, this November will be 11 years, and so God only knows I've messed up and things, but we think a lot and alike, and I'm really blessed to have her in my life. Frank, only just have just a few more minutes left. Is there anything else you would like to share?
Well, I would just like to encourage folks that there have been a lot of good books written over the ages, and and I see in the used bookstore this great section for self-help. And I'm sorry, you don't need any more self-help than picking up a Bible.
Yeah.
Just get a good Bible and start to read it. I've got many Bibles. I've got King James. I've got the Revised King James. I've got the Gideon's King James. I've got the New American Standard Bible. My favorite, and I don't particularly like the word-for-word translation, but the notes that it gives you is the New Jerusalem Study Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting Bible to read the footnotes at the bottom, and this word could be this, or this is a gloss on that. This is a play on words in the Hebrew, because this could be, this word and that word is spelled similarly. And it's just a fascinating study Bible. And I've had it for many years, and I really enjoy it. I even have a Mormon Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I have all kinds of Bibles. I don't have a Geneva. That's next on my list. That's the one the Pilgrims brought over. I've got a Dewey Reams, which was the first English translation that predates the King James, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a Catholic Bible. And, it just, read. Read. Turn off the TV. Better yet, take it out and shoot it. Because if you've never shot a television, it's really fun. They don't explode, they implode.
Yeah.
And, I've had the occasion to take one out for target practice every now and then, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of ways to, enrich your mind and to learn things. And, listening to the radio, reading books, DVDs. I'm in a group of people. We have sent out 20,000 DVDs in this area in the last 8 years, free, gratis. We get them out at gun shows. There's some gun shops in town. We do the political gamut, but we also get into GMO foods, the danger of fluoride in drinking water,
mm-hmm.
all kinds of different subjects. And these DVDs are very informational. They're documentaries, and they'll lead you. You have to understand that it's not just one thing that you're being told by the mass media that's a lie. It's everything. And if you put those glasses on, so we live in an Alice in Wonderland world where black is white and white is black, you'll be right 98% of the time.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind, that just doubt everything that you're told by the mass media and figure out they're 180 degrees out, and you'll be right most of the time.